start with, first of all, there was a question about, is this being recorded? And yes, it's being recorded. It will be on the district YouTube channel in a couple of days. And also, because it's being recorded, I'm going to present in this order. I'm going to just go straight through the presentation first. And I think that actually will address many questions. And then at the end, we will come back and I will answer some questions. And Mr. Misbahoudin, the high school supervisor, will be here by then. And he will also answer some questions if there's any questions that impact high school. But keep adding your questions to the Q&A so that at the end, we're able to go through all of them and make sure that we have answered them. And also if we're really sly, we can answer them as we're going along. All right, I am Kimberly Bean. I am the K-8 supervisor of math and science. And as I said later, Mr. Jamil Misbahoudin will be here, and he is the 9-12 supervisor of math and science. Actually, he's STEM because he also handles computer science courses and that sort of thing. So together we cover K-12 in math and science. And I think we'll be able to confidently give you a really good picture of what you need to know about the courses you're selecting and what it means when you select those courses in the short term and in the long term. First of all, we're here because the Board of Education has an access policy. What that access policy means is that any student can choose level of course that is offered at their grade level. So since in math in the middle school, we happen to have different offerings, we present to everyone and give everyone the opportunity to choose. What you want to be is an informed consumer when you're making this choice, right? You want to have as much information as you can. There's some of it, I know, we're talking about children, which is high variability in whether they're having a good year or a good marking period or that sort of thing, or how they're handling adolescence. All those things factor in. So I understand that, but nonetheless, we're going to try to give you as much information as possible so that you can make an informed choice. Just so you know, this is the sequence of events. Yesterday or today, you should have received an email blast that contained a letter that described the course offerings next year. So if you are a parent of a 5th grader, you received a letter by email. You received a letter by email saying these are the 6th grade courses. And if your child is a 6th grader, you received a letter saying these are the 7th grade choices, and so on. And then tonight we have the information night. The recording will be available. The last day to select a course you'll be doing the selection in Power School, and I will show you how to do that. The last day is April 8th, which is the day before break. So that's a good endpoint in your mind to know you should select a choice by that date, by spring break. And then coming later will be information from your child's middle school about summer school options. We'll be offering some summer support classes in the district, and that is organized, managed at the school level. So you will be hearing directly from your school main office about that. I'm going to see this chart several times during the presentation, mainly because I think it's tough to absorb all of it at one time. Each time I come to it, I'm going to provide a little bit more information about it or a new perspective on it. So this is the first time I'm putting it out there. So it's in the letter you received. This is just showing by column which courses are offered at each grade level. So in grade 6, so 5th graders are going to choose one of 2 courses, either grade 6 math or grade 6 pre-algebra. Students going into 7th grade will choose one of 3 courses, grade 7 math, grade 7 pre-algebra, or algebra 1. And students going into grade 8 will choose one of 3. Grade 8, intro to algebra, algebra 1, or geometry. And notice the geometry you can only take if the student has already successfully completed algebra 1. So that's just the introduction to it. These are the course offerings. Now, the letter also told you how you're going to make this selection. You're going to sign into the Power School parent portal. And if you don't have that, you can email parent portal help at somsd.k12.nj.us. You can usually also contact your school's library or main office. They often know some workarounds with that. But you want to look down the left-hand column until you see the word forms. And then you click on forms. And when you click on forms, you're going to get this list of different forms that may or may not be relevant to your child. Some will be relevant, some will not. And you're going to scroll down that list until you get to the form that says Middle School Math Course Selection for 2022-2023. And you'll click on that. And when you click on it, your child's name will already be filled in because you're in Power School, so it knows the student that you're filling it out for. And then it's just, you'll get to choose which of the courses offered at your child's grade level, and you just select from those courses. The other thing that's available there is you'll see a link. If you didn't receive the letter that went out in the email blast, you can link to it in Power School right when you're making the course selection. So if you open it up and you go, I'm not sure, wait, which course was it? You can click on that letter and it will have the description right there. All right, this is the second time you're seeing the chart. We're going to go a little deeper this time. Each of these courses are written with the New Jersey state standards. Now, when I say standards, I'm talking about the New Jersey state standards, but you should know that the Common Core standards, which are for the whole country, are almost identical to the New Jersey standards, or New Jersey is almost identical to the Common Core. So they're virtually interchangeable. To say Common Core standards or to say the New Jersey math standards, really the same thing, only a few words changed here or there, nothing of significant consequence. So they are really the same thing. So if you look at the grade 6 column, grade 6 math contains all of the standards that the state and the nation has determined all 6th graders should learn in mathematics. In grade 6 pre-algebra, it contains all the things that a 6th grader should learn and all the things a 7th grader should learn. So in grade 6 math, the progress would be sort of like we introduce something new, model it, practice it, and then the next day we go a little bit more in depth with the practice. And then on the third day, we would introduce a new extension upon that. So you're getting something new probably roughly every other day. I mean, it depends on the topic, but there's a lot of practice that follows introducing a new topic. In pre-algebra, we're combining 2 grade levels in 1 year, and we're teaching everything for 6th grade and everything for 7th grade. That means we are moving very fast. Now, we're lucky that the 6th grade standards and the 7th grade standards work very, very well together. For example, 6th grade standards will say something like introducing negative numbers and their distance from 0. And then in 7th grade, it will be adding and subtracting with negative numbers, right? So it's really just an extension of the same topic, but nonetheless, there's new concepts constantly because we're doing so much in 1 year. So if grade 6 math was teach, practice, grade 6 pre-algebra is teach. It moves very quickly. We're introducing new things every day, often 1 or 2 things a day. And so if you have a child who learns better by ruminating, by marinating, by reflecting on something, you want to pick a course that allows more time for that, because there really isn't a whole lot of time for absorbing in that way. It just has to be immediate. This is how you do it. Here's 2 or 3 practice problems, moving on to the next thing in pre-algebra. So that's a distinction between the two. In 7th grade, Grade 7 math and grade 7 pre-algebra are very similar, almost identical. The difference is in grade 7 pre-algebra, we're really trying to get students ready to do algebraic thinking. And so we are expanding on some of the topics that a 7th grader would need to know. Something like, finding percents or, ratios and rates and things like that. And then we would expand that into more complicated or complex contexts, extensions, unfamiliar problem types. We're trying to push the pre-algebra kids to a bit of discomfort and teaching them how to work through that discomfort and find their way through it, because that's what Algebra 1 is going to be the following year. So the courses, grade 7 math, grade 7 pre-algebra, both of them are teach, practice, teach, practice, teach, practice. The difference is the practice and application in pre-algebra is going to be more higher level extension, abstract, unfamiliar contexts. And then the third course, Algebra 1 in grade 7, is again 2 courses combined into 1 year. It's the grade 8 standards, which we call grade 8 Intro to Algebra, but it's the grade 8 standards, and it is all the high school Algebra 1 standards. So this is another course where you're doing 2 grades in 1 year, and it has to be teach something new every day. And so this is incredibly rigorous, because remember, Algebra 1, the standards in the nation and in the state are written for high school students. And we're putting them in front of 7th graders. Now, there are some 7th graders that's perfectly comfortable. And as the year progresses, they're ready for it, because we start with graphing lines that have different slopes, but then we move into quadratics, which is a much more complex set of equations that we're dealing with, and much more complex the variables and how it impacts the shape of what we're graphing. And so this becomes, in elementary school, everything's numeric. Everything has to do with numeracy, number sense, how numbers relate to each other. But as you're going through middle school, it shifts from being numeric to being algebraic or abstract reasoning. And that's what Algebra 1 is very much that. It is, it's really about being able to not just factor the equations, but being able to predict what the graph will look like for that equation, given how the variables change. So it's some heavy stuff. So just know that is a rigorous course. It is challenging. I think it's developmental, whether some students are ready for it. It's not just, are they smart enough? It's not about smart enough. It's sort of like a maturational readiness for abstraction. All right, and then in grade 8, we have 3 courses. Grade 8 Intro to Algebra. This course, this is the grade 8 standards. It takes the first half of Algebra 1 and it builds in foundations to it. In other words, it introduces the concept of what a function is, and so that students are able to have a basic understanding of a function is and how the x impacts the y value, so that when they get into Algebra 1, they're ready to just move forward with that. We don't have to spend time developing what is a function with them. They're ready, they understand it. It also lays some foundation in terms of irrational numbers, negative exponents, scientific notation. So a couple of things that they're going to need to use, systems of equations, things they're going to need and use in Algebra 1. It just introduces them it's sort of like doing a warm-up before you do a sprint, right? So that's what the grade 8 Intro to Algebra is. Then if the student selects Algebra 1, it is that mixture of the grade 8 course and the high school algebra standards, and then geometry. It's all the high school geometry standards and a little bit of trigonometry thrown in just for fun. So I always get is, what's the difference between grade 6 pre-algebra and grade 7 pre-algebra? And it's a great question. They are very, very, very similar. So actually all three of these courses, grade 6 pre-algebra, grade 7 pre-algebra, and grade 7 math, are all very similar in that the end outcome is to be able to be fluent and flexible with the grade 7 standards. In grade 6, you're going through it very quickly because in 1 year, they're learning the grade 6 and the grade 7. So we don't have a whole lot of time to marinate and ruminate on it. We just do it. In grade 7 pre-algebra, they get to expand more, develop their thinking on pre-algebra so that they are more ready going into algebra 1. We also, in grade 7 pre-algebra, we sneak in a little bit of the grade 8 just as a way to develop some readiness for those students going into algebra 1. And there are just some things with equations that we can move to very quickly. We can do, when we're working with ratio and proportion, we can take the line of best fit and easily connect that to slope and so on and so on. So we're able to make a few of those connections, but in no way are we teaching the 8th grade course in grade 7 pre-algebra. It's really just higher level reasoning with the grade 7 standards. That's what grade 7 pre-algebra is. So those two, very similar. So similar, in fact, when we have students who choose grade 6 pre-algebra, and if they get below a C in that course, let's say below a 75%, we strongly recommend that in 7th grade, they take grade 7 pre-algebra. Because if they're getting below a C in grade 6 pre-algebra, they are not ready for algebra 1. And we have many who try it, and you know, we have all kinds of systems built in for students to improve their grade, right? They can earn some points back, they can retake tests. So they do all that. So they don't necessarily get, they don't fail the course because we don't let that happen too much. We keep we keep dogging them until they make the corrections they need to make. But they're not truly fluent in those things. And so we strongly recommend that if they're getting below a C in grade 6 pre-algebra, that they take grade 7 pre-algebra the following year. And it has everything to do with setting them up for success when they enter algebra 1 in 8th grade. Because, and I can have Mr. and Ms. Bodine talk a little bit about this later, but algebra 1 is like the magic key, the skeleton key for the later math classes. And the difference between those, we even see it in geometry. The students who truly understand algebra are able to apply it and use it when they're in geometry and in algebra 2 and in pre-calculus. And those that never really understood algebra 1 end up struggling later. So we want students to be ready when they enter algebra 1. So if they're showing a struggle in grade 6 pre-algebra, we're going to recommend grade 7 pre-algebra to make sure that they're absolutely ready when they go into algebra 1. Then the other question I get is, algebra 1 in 7th grade and algebra 1 in 8th grade, are they the same course? And the answer is yes, they're 100% the same course. Teachers plan together, the teachers share assessments, they share lessons, they share a sequence. So it is absolutely the same course. It is different than algebra 1 at the high school. The reason is we're squeezing 2 grades into 1 year. We're squeezing grade 8 and algebra 1. And so it has to be taught at a different pace with a little bit of different outcomes, but we're still meeting the standards of the course. In algebra 1 in high school, they're able to go into much more depth because they have more time. And then the last question, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that why does geometry have a prerequisite of algebra 1? And the answer to that is because algebra 1 and geometry are high school courses. They are also, as determined by the state and by Columbia High School, they are high school graduation requirements. These are required courses, and we insist that students do them in the sequence that we have laid out because this is the way that we have found students are most successful. And that's why it is a prerequisite. But it's Algebra 1's a required course. You either have to take it in 7th grade, 8th grade, or 9th grade. You don't get out of it. You have to take it. It's just a matter of when are you going to take it. And same with geometry. When are you going to take it? You have to take it. So that's why there's that prerequisite, because it's part of this, the state graduation requirements and so on. Now, when you take Algebra 1 and geometry, even though those are high school courses, but you're taking them in the middle school, they do not show up on the high school transcript. To me, that's the gift of middle school math, is that it's like a chance to try. And if you mess up, you can, retake the course. You can switch to another level. You can try something else. And colleges will never know. It never shows up on your transcript what's in the middle school, only what's in the high school. So let's say you took Algebra 1 as an 8th grader and you struggled with it. You could take Algebra 1 again in 9th grade, and you're probably going to be a lot more successful at Algebra 1 when you do that. You're going to learn more Algebra 1. You're probably going to get a good grade. And that's all that will be in your transcript is the 9th grade Algebra 1. Same with geometry. If you had struggled in 8th grade, you could take it again in 9th grade and be more successful in it, and that's what goes on your transcript. So it's kind of like you get do-overs, because middle school is not seen in any way on official transcripts that go out anywhere. So let's talk about the way students can progress through these. The state has written it. This is the 5-year layout. Grade 6 has the math standards. Grade 7 is grade 7 math or pre-algebra. Grade 8, the standards are intro to algebra. Grade 9 is algebra 1, and grade 10 is geometry. If a student followed the state standards as they are written, you would cover those 5 courses in 5 years. That is normal, healthy, and a good way to go. It really gives students plenty of time to learn, develop ideas, practice it, and get some confidence in mastering. So that's one pathway that students could go. Another is to accelerate 1 year. So you would start in grade 6 math and then go to grade 7 pre-algebra. Then in grade 8, you would combine the grade 8 intro to algebra and algebra 1, and then in grade 9 geometry. So you've accelerated 1 year, because for 1 year you learned. Also very normal across the country, by the way. You'll hear of a lot of schools that offer algebra 1 in 8th grade. Now, something that's used to be really unique, but is getting less and less unique. More districts are trying this, and that is it's taking those 5 years of mathematics, some students putting them into 3 years. So this means when the student is in grade 6, they're taking grade 6 pre-algebra, which is all the 6th and 7th grade standards. And when they're in 7th grade, they're doing all of the grade 8 and all the algebra 1 standards. And then when they're in grade 8, they're doing all the geometry and a little bit of the trig standards. So I know that as Americans, we look at this and we're like, I want the bargain. I want 5 years and 3 years. And I can say it's just like some bargains in that, you sort of get what you pay for, meaning we're teaching all of the standards, but we are moving very quickly in that bottom row there. We're moving very quickly, and students do not have a lot of time to reflect on, to practice. There's some practice, but not nearly as much as if you took one of the other 2 routes. So yes, it is possible to complete 5 years of mathematics in 3 years. However, when you do that, there may be some things that a student didn't develop well enough, didn't develop deeply enough, and it could impact their learning in algebra 2 and in calculus, and of course, calculus. So that's the trade-off, right? It's a great advantage. but there's also, you have to be aware that, and the thing is, in middle school, they don't feel the stress of it or the pain of it in the same way until you get to high school. And so you think, okay, I'm doing okay. I'm getting B's and C's, so I'm doing fine. And we kind of keep going. But then some of those kids then hit a wall. And so we're trying to prevent that wall, which is why we look for, sometimes we recommend that they retake a course just so we can get them past that area where they're struggling. Back to the chart again, just like I promised. And this time we're going to look at it another way. So first we just looked at it as what are the courses that are offered. Then we looked at it about what are the descriptions of the courses and where are there similar courses built in. And now we're going to look at it in terms of those progressions I just showed you. Chart. We're going to start at the top. And remember that top row are the way the standards are laid out. The grade 6 standards, the grade 7 standards, the grade 8 standards. So a student could do that. They could go from grade 6 math to grade 7 math to grade 8 intro to algebra. And that just means they're following the way the standards, the state and national standards are written. Another option is for a student to start in grade 6 math, then go to pre-algebra, grade 7 pre-algebra, and then when they're in pre-algebra, depending how pre-algebra went for them, they could make one of two choices. They could say, this was easy, I'm ready for a greater challenge. Or they could say, this was what we call in elementary school, just right. This was my just right math class, and I would like to learn more at this pace. Then they could go to grade 8 intro to algebra. So after pre-algebra, grade 7 pre-algebra, they could either go into grade 8 intro to algebra, or they could go into algebra 1, knowing that that algebra 1 course is actually 2 courses in one and moves quickly. And then another recommended path is a student could start in grade 6 pre-algebra. And as I mentioned before, if a student is successful in grade 6 pre-algebra, they're getting A's, they understand everything, not a problem. They don't need to redo their quizzes. They don't need to make corrections. They don't need to earn back points. They're ready for algebra 1, fine. They move on to algebra 1. But if they were struggling in any way in grade 6 pre-algebra, if they had to retake a lot of their tests and earn back points in a way to keep afloat in a B or a C, you have to debate whether they need another year of pre-algebra or not. And that's why it's a dotted line. It's sort of like, it's an option that's there because we think in the long run that might be better for some students. But of course they can move on to algebra 1 also. And then when they're in algebra 1 in 7th grade, same thing. Algebra 1, easy, got it, understand it. Then they're ready to move on to geometry. Or if algebra 1 was a slog, if it was a struggle every day, if it was tears at home, if it was arguments with anyone who's trying to help them, if it's having to retake tests and find ways to earn back points, we will recommend and suggest that they retake algebra 1. And this sounds, as adults, this is like, yeah, makes total sense, right? Retake, if you didn't master it, take it again. There's no penalty, take it again. With kids, this is a little more socially complicated, right? Like, oh, I already took algebra 1, I have to take algebra 1 again. Am I a complete failure, right? So you have to think about all of that. And for some kids, they might react, they might find it devastating. Other kids might find it as like, woo, I get to do it again and I get a better chance to do it better. Totally depends on the child. And that's why there isn't one right answer for this stuff. You have to know your child. When, when I was a kid, my mother would say I was stubborn. I like to think of it as when someone would tell me, there's no way you can do that. To me, it was like, well, this just got interesting, right? That made me perk up. But not everybody would react that way to some situations. And I don't react that way in dangerous situations, just to be clear. But if somebody was like, then no, that's not, that's not for someone your age, or that's not for whatever, I can do it. I can do it. Bring it on. So if your child has that kind of personality, then they're willing to take risks. They're willing to get a C and on a test and not be devastated by that. Then it might be worth some of these, if they're, challenges, if they're that kind of personality. But we have plenty of kids, especially, I don't know how to say it, especially since COVID, who are more fragile, need more personal interaction, need more personal attention. And if that's where your child is, then I recommend taking a more deliberate course among the math choices. Other things to consider when you're making this choice. And I've already thrown so much at it. And I apologize. It's just the nature of the situation, because I so much want you to know everything I know about this, which would be impossible. But I really want you to understand that I have a son who's in 10th grade at Columbia High School. So, I've been through this. And so I know it not just as I'm not just the supervisor, I'm a customer. And so I understand about what kids are thinking, about when they need challenge, about how they handle the adversity of taking some of these challenges. So, so I so much want you to understand and make the best choice that you can make for your child. All right, so some things to consider. One, and this is a biggie. I know many of you are parents of fifth graders, so you're like, did she just talk to me about calculus? I am talking about calculus, very briefly. You don't want me talking about calculus. That's Mr. and Ms. Bahudian's job, not mine. But I will say this, many parents come into this and they look at the courses for middle school, and all they're thinking is, how do I make sure my child can get to calculus by 12th grade? Whether they even need calculus by 12th grade, that depends on the student, what they want to study in college, if they want to go to college, all of those different options are out there. But I can tell you, no matter what math courses you select in middle school, Mr. and Ms. Bahudin has a path to get your child to calculus if that's what you're trying to make happen. There is a path, no matter which of the middle school courses you take. So I say that to you as like take the pressure off. Stop worrying about calculus. Let Mr. and Ms. Bahudin worry about calculus. And you just worry about, how can I have a successful adolescent in middle school? So that's the first thing. Take that off your plate. Don't stress out. 2, each student develops abstract and multivariable reasoning at a different pace. It can be so easy to get sucked up into, all the other kids are doing this, or all his friends are doing this, or it's so easy to get caught up in that. But it's not a matter of who's smarter or who's faster. It's really about who's ready to deal with these abstract concepts and juggle multiple variables at one time, or multiple steps of going through equations. And that's more than just mathematics, right? That's developmental, that is organizational, executive functioning, as we say. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that are beyond mathematics. So consider that. 3, COVID quarantines and virtual instruction have impacted student learning. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. Regardless of how you view what the last 2 years have been, I can say that students today, grader is different than a fifth grader was 2 years ago. We've just all been, we're the adults, the grown-ups are different than we were 2 years ago. Everyone has gone through some major changes in the way we process information, the way we learn, the way we manage information. And so there are some kids who thrived over the last 2 years. They like all the independence, they like being around less people, love it, love it, love it. And there are other kids who struggled in that way. And there's some who did well in the moment and then didn't retain as much as they would have liked. Or as my son calls it, did I really take French 1? Like, yeah, you did. You got an A, kid, but he doesn't remember it. So, it's been a pretty challenging couple of years. And so just know that that's another factor. These are not the same as fifth graders were 2 years ago, not the same as sixth graders were 2 years ago. They have had completely different experiences. And there is no one assessment or rule that can predict if a student will be successful in a given math course. So you're going to say, Ms. Bean, tell me, what do they need in order to be successful in the math course? And my answer is going to focus on the mathematical skills and concepts they need in order to be ready for the next course. That's the answer I'm going to give. But I know that it's not the whole picture. I know it has to do with some other things. So I've also seen students who didn't have some of those skills, who learned those skills too sweet when the pressure was on. And I've seen other kids who didn't have those skills and completely crumbled under the pressure of it. So everybody is different, and it's hard to tease all of those distinctions out with any one assessment. So just know that. I'm going to give you some guidelines to think about, but they aren't rules. They aren't gateways. They aren't anything. They're just consider this, consider that. So if a student is currently in grade 6 or 7, the choice is much easier because you've already been through a year of middle school at least, and you've already been through a year at least of middle school mathematics. That puts you in a better position to know if you're ready for more challenge, or if you're at your just right place, or if maybe you need to step back a little. You probably already know that. So things to consider. Did the student average an A throughout their current math course? Or another way to look at that is, did they average below a C in the current math course? Is that something we need to consider? Is the student looking for more challenge and work? We have students who get an A in a course. Let's say they take grade 7 pre-algebra and they're like, I got an A all year. I feel good about this. Next year, I want to take grade 8 intro to algebra because I'm at my just right place and I like getting A's. I'm happy getting A's. And then we have other students who say, I've got an A all year. It's too easy. I want something that, pushes me a little harder. They're willing to take B's and an occasional C by moving up a level. Totally depends on the personality of the child. And has the student been successful managing middle school this year? Something that gets lost in all of this is, in elementary school, we have at least 75 minutes a day for mathematics. In middle school, we have 45 minutes a day. So they're getting 30 minutes less of math, and we're trying to cover 2 years in 1 year in some of the in less time, right? So it's really just, that's another piece that kids have to learn to manage. I mean, it seems true in language arts. We have like 2 hours in elementary school, and then we go to 45 minutes in middle school. And then science and social studies in elementary, they were sort of like tiny subjects, almost like specials. Well, in middle school, they're an everyday, equal in gravity and weight to math and language arts. Right? So now a child is juggling 4 heavy subjects, and it's very possible to get homework in all 4 of them in a night. And so how is a student handling that? Students currently in grade 5, this is so much harder to make the decision, because it's like saying, my child has been completely safe and successful playing in 2 feet of water. No problem. And now we're about to put them in 5 feet of water. And so are they going to be as successful and as safe in 5 feet of water as they were in 2 feet of water? We don't know. We don't know. And so you have to take that into consideration, is that this isn't like elementary school, right? There's no teacher following them around saying, you forgot your permission slip, and you forgot, right? In elementary school, they juggled like 2 teachers, a math teacher, a language arts teacher, and they went back and forth. And if you left something in the other room, usually the teacher walked over and was like, you forgot your notebook, right? You were nurtured, right? In some might say more than nurtured, right? But when you get to middle school, part of the goal of middle school is to teach students this independence, to move from class to class, to manage all of their materials, and a locker, and only being able to go to the locker at certain times of the day, all of those things. So very hard to compare, oh, my child was always successful in elementary math. It's like, well, yeah, it's elementary school, right? We're not trying to hurt anybody. We're trying to be as kind and supportive and helpful and give the students every chance that we can. But by middle school, we're expecting the students to step up more on their own and not totally have it done by the teacher. So things to consider for fifth grade, and I know this is a hard choice for parents of fifth graders. Did the students score 4s in most math topics on the progress report? That's like saying, did they get mostly 95s on their, did they show that they have mastery of fifth grade math and the ability to extend it into some higher level problem solving? That's the first thing. Next thing is, did the students score in the 90th percentile on the Winter Star Math Assessment? We give this assessment 3 times during the year. It's called Star Renaissance Math. We give it the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it's purely just an internal piece we use to monitor student growth to make sure all of our students are keeping pace and who needs support and that sort of thing. You can ask your child's 5th grade math teacher to have a copy of this to see what percentile they scored in. I say if they're in the 90th percentile, they're mathematically ready to try grade 6 pre-algebra. If they're below that, you need to consider a lot of other factors. But again, it's not a rule. That's just me looking at it saying, okay, I know what content they've mastered in order to get that score, and that's what I need them to know in order to be ready for grade 6 pre-algebra. And then the last thing is, how will students handle changing rooms and teachers every 45 minutes? So that's the last piece you really need to consider. And math does not operate in isolation. It's on your mind right now because it's the course you get to choose for next year, but they're taking many courses. There are 8 periods in a day, and only one of them is lunch. So all of those courses are happening, all of those different teachers, all those different rooms. It's a lot to manage and juggle. So your child, how well are they able to make change, stop what they're doing and move on to the next thing, organize their items to move to the next thing. How difficult is this going to be, this transition to middle school? That's the last time I'm going to show you this chart. But these are the choices that you're making. And I've given you a whole bunch of things to consider. I'll open it to questions, unless there's any of the co-hosts, which I consider special guests.
I'll just add to reiterate the point you had said earlier, Kim, about pathways to getting to calculus. Um, there are every single student as they enter the high school has a pathway to get to calculus. Um, I've never, this is now my 6th year at CHS. I've never had a time where a student wants to get to calculus and wasn't able to, either through we found ways, either there's options if they want to take 2 math classes in a year, or if they want to, or they just keep going on the regular pace that they're on. Most of the time, just going on the pace that they're on is more than enough to get them to calculus before they graduate. I will say, so that's never happened in the 6 years where I've had a student want to get to calculus as a senior and didn't. What does happen sometimes is we do have situations where a student goes quickly, and then their senior year they may be like more limited in the choices that they've had because they've kind of exhausted a lot of the options. And so, just to reiterate the point that you made, that the pathways are there. If your long-term goal is calculus, you can get there many ways once you get to Columbia High School. Do you want me to?
I was just going to ask, I had mentioned to them about they can get through middle school, but there might be some things that will show up later when they're in Algebra 2 or Pre-Calculus or one of the other later courses. Do you know off the top of your head some of the areas where you see, like I know just from my son having physics this year, that there were kids in the class who struggled with some of the physics because they couldn't do the equations necessary in order to solve the physics problem. So that's one piece. Where else do you see students having some challenges because they didn't deeply understand Algebra 1?
Yeah, a lot of times I'll hear it from pre-calculus and calculus teachers about like solving of equations of or I'll hear it from even biology freshman biology teachers or students just maybe not totally mastering like understanding what a graph is telling them. Those are the areas that we'll hear. And so in the in the high school math and science classes, it's just those foundational skills like solving equations, understanding ratios, creating a graph, understanding what a graph is telling you. Those are like some of the recurrent topics that when a teacher notices that a student is struggling, that's where we find it. Yeah.
So we have a question that says, how do sixth grade math selections impact a student's ability to shift tracks in future grades, including high school? So in the middle school, I think I've shown you with the arrows that there are ways to move around. And I'm not even showing everything here. I'm just showing the ones that we recommend. There are others. There are other choices you can make. For example, a student could be in grade 6 math, and in theory, they could choose Algebra 1 in 7th grade. Boy, do I not recommend it. But it is possible. They're just going to have to do a lot of learning on their own in order to be ready to do that because they haven't had any of the 7th grade yet. So there are more options there. It's just that you have to shift things around to make it happen. And the same is pretty much true at the high school, but I'll let Mr. Misbahudin explain how the selection is.
Yeah, similarly at the high school, students are able to choose whatever course as long as they've met the prerequisite. We do have instances where students take like a higher level than the year before or a lower level than the year before. Sometimes we'll have situations where an eighth grader decides to repeat their course as a ninth grader, and uh, Ms. Bean alluded to this earlier. The beauty of the middle school is that those grades don't make their way to the high school transcript. And so let's say you take, you know, geometry in eighth grade and you do okay, but you're like, you know what, I wish I had a better understanding of this. You take it as a ninth grader and no college knows that you're repeating the course. You're just taking it geometry. The only thing the colleges see is everything you take after middle school, right? So as a ninth grader. So that's an option too. If you're kind of in that route. I saw one question in the chat. Will the district offer Algebra 2 during the summer? We offer for incoming CHS students or current CHS students every summer. We offer Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So all of the parents of eighth graders and older will get an email from me in a few weeks about how you can, if you're interested in how you could sign up for that. And so that's a route some students decide to take also. And those courses, they count for high school credit. They go on the transcript. They count for your GPA weights. They're taught by our CHS math teachers, so it's the same curriculum. And in some ways, I think it's better. Obviously, you're giving up time in your summer, but in some ways, I think it's a better experience for the students because they don't have any other courses that summer to weigh them down. They're with their teacher for an extended period of time, so there's a lot more time to ask questions and move at a pace that's manageable for you. Um, and it's typically a motivated group of teachers and students in the summertime, so it's a nice opportunity. You'll any eighth grade and older parents will get a letter from me in a couple weeks about that. And I saw a quick. I'll just read one more question, Miss Bean, and then I'll just read the high school ones. How many years are required in high school? 3 years are required in high school, and it doesn't matter. It does whether you start with Algebra 1 as a freshman or whether you start with Algebra 2 as a freshman. You have to take 3 high school math courses. Um, as far as the recommended for a competitive college, I think it's really more so on your major. If your major is a math science major, then you probably want to take a math course as a senior. If your major is not math or science, you can still get into a very good college with three years of mathematics. You know, if your goal is to be an engineer, then I think you should be taking a senior math. If your goal is, you know, after high school to do something in maybe the arts or you know, in literature or history, and if you have three years of math at CHS, I don't think you need to force a fourth year. Um, and so yeah, those are two I just popped out. I'm sorry, Miss Bean. I don't know if we just want to read them and just answer them to the group. Is that the game plan?
And
Okay.
so I'm sort of going through them and I'm asking, you can jump in. It doesn't, we're
Okay.
very casual here. Can a sixth grader take seventh grade math? A sixth grader would take grade 6 pre-algebra, which includes grade 7 math in it. But they can't be in the grade 7 math class. They stay with sixth graders in grade 6 pre-algebra. If a student selects sixth grade math, can they change to pre-algebra if they find it not challenging enough? If not, what are the options for them? The answer is yes. If they start in sixth grade math and they're like, woo, this is, I want more. I love math. Then yes, they can. The only, and we make sure that we start the years similarly so that in the two courses, so that students can move around. But if we really don't like to make that shift too much past the middle of the first marking period, like we really want that change to happen, because otherwise they'll start to miss too much of, as I said, the grade 6 pre-algebra course moves, right? It's moving. And so if you stay out of it too long, you'll have trouble catching up. And so that's why we try to do that, let's say in September, maybe early October, to make that switch. But yes, it is possible.
I see too about CHS summer courses. You can take a CHS summer course as a repeat if you didn't do well in the course in eighth grade or even in high school. Um, well, actually, if you didn't do well in eighth grade and you want to take it again in the summer, you can. Um, and again, it will only count the one that you take at CHS. So let's say you got a C in Algebra 1 in eighth grade, and then you decide, you know what, I want to take it again in the summer, and you get an A. That Algebra 1 transcript will say an A, and you'll still be in geometry in the beginning of a freshman year like you were going to be anyway. I see another question says, if an incoming freshman takes a summer course and does not do well, will that show up on the transcript? Um, the beauty of the summer is we have more control of that timeline. It's only 5 weeks, and so you know at the high school, once you're in a course for you know about a few months, you're kind of locked into having to stay in the class. In the summer, what I typically do is we update with students with their grades and we give them the option to withdraw from the course, and then we don't have to put that on the transcript at all because there's no marking periods in the summer. It's just a course. So actually, you know, many students either get a good grade in the summer or we just wipe the course from their transcript. They don't have to have that stick with them. You know, we want the summer courses to be an opportunity for you to advance. We don't want any penalty associated with that. And so if a student gets like a C minus in a course or D, we're not going to keep that on your transcript. We're going to just say, hey, take it, you know, take it again in the fall, and we'll, you know, and this doesn't have to come up on your transcript at all.
I have a, will there be a summer Algebra 1 prep course for rising 7th graders? That is not in the plans at the time. Our summer courses at the middle school are mainly support for students who might be struggling in, and so not for advancement, not for, you know, several years acceleration advancement. What we do for all of our courses is we send home obviously the summer packet that kids can do, and then also an online textbook and online practice that students can do to get ready for the course. So I know it's not the same. It's much easier to send, you know, your child, but we do offer options. You just have to be a little more self-motivated to get it done. And frankly, that's a trait they're going to need if they're going to be in Algebra 1 in 7th grade. Do the math teachers provide a letter of recommendation for which course my child should select? No, we do not. There is no, we don't send any scores. The teachers don't make any recommendations. You can contact your child's math teacher and say, what do you think? I'm on the fence. I'm not sure. What are you seeing? And they will happily, you know, explain that to you on email or phone or however you communicate with them. But we do not send out a letter of recommendations. The purpose of the access policy that I started at the beginning with the Board of Education access policy is that students are able to make this choice free of any prejudgment or preconceived notions from us, the district. And so that's why we do not make a recommendation, because it sounds like, how weird, they don't make a recommendation. But that is because we're trying to let students think outside the box, to be adventurous, to make it, you know, to maybe challenge themselves. But it's also why I gave you some guidelines to just even think about ballpark what might be a good course for them. When do we need to submit this by? April 8th is the answer. For grade 7 selection, why algebra does not have a prerequisite for pre-algebra. Oh my gosh, that the math teachers would be applauding you on that question. They say that all the time. Kim, can't we make grade 7 pre-algebra a prerequisite for algebra? And all I can say is the administration at the time that this was put into place, that was a no dice. I was not allowed to make pre-algebra a prerequisite for algebra 1, but it absolutely should be, right? We don't want students going into algebra 1 if they do not have a strong mastery and flexibility and fluency and reasoning of pre-algebra. They will struggle. It doesn't mean they'll fail. They might catch up and do well, but they're going to have to fill in some pieces they don't have. Yes, the letter initially said April 1, and then I did change the due date for April 8th to make the selection. And that's simply because we moved this presentation night 1 week because we had accidentally scheduled it on Purim. So we moved it, we delayed it a week. And so when I delayed this evening a week, I said, I'm going to give them until spring break then to make the selection.
A couple answers or questions coming in this way. Can an 8th grader take geometry over the summer and then take algebra 2 in 9th grade if they are not on the accelerated track already? Yes. Any incoming 9th grader can take any course that's next for them, algebra 1, geometry, or algebra 2. And I would say in that situation, if you're taking geometry over the summer, you are already kind of accelerated. You're not as accelerated as possible, but you're already pretty accelerated at that rate. Trigonometry is not a high school course anymore in many high schools. It's just because it's a small topic, so it's kind of folded into geometry and pre-calculus. So that's, you don't see that listed anymore. And I think this is a general question, I guess, for Ms. Bean or myself. Is there sort of at-home test that a student can take to gauge their competency before making their decision? I don't think you need to take an at-home test. I think you need to reflect on the scores and experiences that you're having in your classes now. As Ms. Bean was saying earlier, like if you're getting A's and or how you're doing on your STAR testing or your assessments, or what that experience has been like for you, that's really your best guidance. I don't think you have to take an additional assessment of any kind. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ms. Beam.
Well, I kind of knew this question was going to come up because if it's what I would want to know. And so I said, well, just for kicks, I personally took the end of year challenge for Khan Academy grade 5. And I can say it's not, if you wanted to use that assessment as a gauge, your child should be scoring 95% or more. It's pretty easy. So I don't know of a great measure offhand, because what we're actually looking for is someone who's able to solve things that are unfamiliar and they haven't seen before. I can tell you, if you talk to their 5th grade teacher, you want to know specifically how good is their whole number computation, like multi-digit. Can they do 4 digits times 2 digits? Can they do 3 digits divided by 2 digits, right? Their whole number, their decimal computation, and then the biggie is fractions. Are they able to generate equivalent fractions? Are they able to add and subtract fractions and mixed numbers with unlike denominators, right? That's sort of the Mount Everest of elementary mathematics. Can you subtract mixed numbers with unlike denominators? It's a doozy because it requires so many steps and thinking to make the right decisions in it. So that's a big piece. So whole number computation, decimal computation, and understanding of fractions and fraction computation. So if you asked fifth grade teachers, like, don't go to the fifth grade teachers and be like, how do they do in studying triangles? Not a good predictor of their achievement in sixth grade. But those computational pieces, and especially fractions, because they are complicated and complex and require a great deal of number sense, those are the best predictors. So I would recommend you talk to the teacher. Someone asked, is there a substantial difference in the amount of homework for the grade 6 math courses? There is not a difference in the amount of homework. There is a difference in how hard the homework is. It's the same teachers, meaning all our sixth grade teachers teach both grade 6 math and grade 6 pre-algebra. So it's the same teachers, they have the same philosophy. You know, they give some homework for practice, but none of them are like homework. You know, it's not really their mindset. So they're not going to give a whole lot of homework, but it will be on what they're learning in class, and pre-algebra is learning harder math in class because they're doing some of the seventh grade. What does the fifth grade profile of a successful student in the more accelerated courses look like? Scores well on tests, but only has average retention of material. Well, the profile I described a little bit, and that is, you know, are they getting 4s on the progress report? Did they, you know, score in the 90th percentile on the STAR assessment? Are they able to move from class to class? The retention piece, I'd have to know more about what is playing into that, right? Retention could be lack of paying attention, which is not any indicator of readiness. there could be a lot of factors that they're just not paying attention because it's a kid, right? And school is school, right? So that could just be that factor. But retention could be something else that's going on. And if it truly is a difficulty with retention, that's going to end up being a problem, not just in math. I mean, it's going to end up being a problem. But if it's a matter of just valuing what they're learning, because the thing about, there are some kids who, because elementary is so forgiving and supportive, there's no great repercussions if you don't keep up. But in middle school, there start to be some repercussions, and suddenly some kids who weren't retaining as much or paying as much attention suddenly sit up and start paying attention because the stakes have gotten higher. And so it all depends why there's difficulty with retention. Again, I would ask the classroom teacher, the math teacher, because they will know best. Are there scenarios in which a rising 7th grader who took grade 6 pre-algebra retakes grade 7 pre-algebra other than a non-passing grade? Well, they can choose it no matter what, whether they just, the other scenario that comes up is the parent or the student realizes they don't want to be as far as geometry by the end of 8th grade, which sounds crazy. Like, what are you saying? You're math supervisor. But they suddenly realize they've put their kid on the Acela train and maybe the kid should have been on a local. And so it's very hard to, this bottom row of acceleration is actually really hard to get off in a way gracefully. It's hard to get off gracefully because you're now going to be in 9th grade taking algebra 2. Well, that's a very, having my son, you know, taken it not too long ago, I can say it's a really challenging course. And so there's no reason on earth that a 9th grader has to take algebra 2. And so sometimes in the middle of grade 6 pre-algebra, the parent realizes, or the child realizes, I don't want to live like this for the next 5 years. And in which case, that's a reason why some then take grade 7 pre-algebra in 7th grade, so that they've now sort of slowed down the pace a little bit. It's not quite as intense as that bottom row, which is super intense. So that's the other scenario. And sometimes they just want to retake it because, usually because it's just like, it was too much pressure. And it's like, I wasn't happy when I was taking that course. It's like, okay, Well, you're 12. We don't want you to be unhappy when you're 12. So please, what can we do to make this a better situation for you? And that may be taking pre-algebra. Do we know who teaches the grade 7 classes? Yes, it's, the principals can rearrange the staffing. So, it's possible that who's teaching 7th grade math right now may not be who's teaching it next year, because all the math teachers are certified to teach all of the grades in middle school. And so they could be rearranged. But generally, who's teaching 7th grade this year is probably who will be teaching it next year, because they've mostly been doing it for quite a while. There's substantial difference in the amount of homework for grades. No, we talked about that. What does the 5th grade provoke? Okay, we talked about that. Are there scenarios in which, right, we talked about that. If my 7th grader is taking grade 7 pre-algebra now, and I know she has to take algebra 1 in 8th grade, the question is, would she be able to take geometry? Yes, Mr. Misbodine answered that. Yes, you can take that in the summer. Are a student's grades in the prior year a good indicator for their potential? A student's grades in the prior year, if their student is already in middle school, yes, it's a very good predictor. Elementary grades are not always a great predictor, because middle school is just a totally different environment than elementary school. And so that's not always a great predictor. But how a student does in math in 6th grade is a pretty good predictor of how they're going to do in math in 7th grade.
I see one. Does CHS offer statistics? Yes, and the prerequisite is Algebra 2. So once you complete Algebra 2, and just so you know, for everyone, Algebra 2 is the highest required math course in the state of New Jersey. So you have to take 3 classes, and one of them has to be Algebra 2. After that, you go different routes. One of them could be statistics.
Is there a significant number of students who start on the accelerated track and drop down to the slower track mid-year? Yes. It's usually about 1/3 of the students will move down. Maybe, I don't know, it's hard to predict it coming off of these COVID years, but prior to COVID, it was about 1/3. Because in grade 6 pre-algebra, because it's very hard to make that choice coming from 5th grade. We have very little movement in 7th and 8th grade, because by that time they understand what the courses are and what's expected. Every now and then we'll have someone move from algebra 1 into grade 7 pre-algebra, or from grade 8 algebra 1 into grade 8 intro to algebra. But I'm talking like maybe 3 a year, like not many. But in this grade 6, we have quite a few students move into grade 6 math, because it's like, this is not what I imagined this course would be. That's what I would say their reaction is. My child, ooh, now I'm losing them. All right, Jamil, are you seeing any others that we didn't answer? Ooh, is it better to go from grade 6 pre-algebra to grade 7 pre-algebra to grade 8 algebra 1, or grade 6 pre-algebra to grade 7 algebra 1 to grade 8 algebra 1? I would delay algebra 1 as long as possible. So I would say, if I was on a game show, I would say grade 6 pre-algebra to grade 7 pre-algebra to grade 8 algebra 1, or grade 6 math to grade 7 pre-algebra to grade 8 algebra 1. Just because it gives the student the most time to grow maturationally, developmentally, and be ready for the course. If I had to choose. I mean, it depends on the student, but if I had to answer, generally that's what I would answer. Okay, talk about that. What percentage take the dotted line path from 6th grade and then take the 6th grade pre-algebra to 7th grade pre-algebra? Not too many, because most of them have dropped down during the year. So like maybe 5 in each middle school, maybe. Will then repeat grade, pre-algebra or repeat algebra 1. most of them have already changed courses at some time during the year. Do all middle schools have a path to all middle school courses have a path to AP Calculus? Yes. Calculus or AP Calculus, it's the same. You would take kids take it the same year. Will there be math books? It's been challenging with online books. I'm reading that one out loud for central office special guest stars who are here. Hopefully, yes. I mean, we have some, but we don't always have enough for every single child. If it's something that you're finding is hindering your child's progress, ask the teacher if you can have a book, because we have some extras. We just don't have necessarily, because we use them in class, we don't necessarily have enough for everyone to take home. If the teacher's saying, no, I don't have any extras, then please email me and I will rustle up one for you. Because we certainly provide them for students who have IEPs that require them. Like there's certain, or 504s that require them. So we do have extras and we do send some home if the student needs it. So let us know. Any student change level, well, ends up taking calculus. And Jamil, if your child follows an accelerated course and ends up taking calculus in their junior year, does that present any issues given some colleges require? Oh, you did the period. Okay. I think we're good. Can they switch during the year? Yes, we talked about that. I think we've covered all of this. I'm feeling good. I heard there's no math boosters for rising sixth graders this year. That is true. Math boosters as a program, which used to run through the math department, no longer exists. And the funding is allocated differently, which means nothing to you, but it means something on our side of it. And so it's more about building level of support. And so the classes we're running are more support level and not about acceleration. So if you have a student who might have been having trouble in fifth grade, then they may qualify for some support over the summer, but we won't have necessarily classes for acceleration. And yes, we will have summer packets. Is there a report that you can refer to parents that tells that story? I don't know what story. All right, I feel like we've hit everything. If you think of any other questions, I'll hang out for a few more minutes and keep scrolling through this and answering anything that gets posted. But other than that, I didn't show this only because it freaks out the parents of the fifth graders. Like, what? But you don't need to know this, parents of fifth graders. But if you have a parent of a seventh grader, you might want to start looking ahead to what are the high school courses and the high school paths. If you go into, you can even Google Columbia High School Program of Studies, and it comes up, and this chart is in there. And also, that letter that was emailed home, there's a link to this chart. So to the high school chart of courses, so you can look at it there. Just know that that is there, but I don't like to whip it out too much in this meeting. Thanks, everybody. This has been great. And tell your friends the recording will be on the district YouTube channel in a couple of days. And then they can just play it as much as they like and, share it with grandparents, whatever else they would like to do with it. Thank you. What score would you recommend a student hold back a little in their selection for next year? Well, I'm going to, hand this off to the math teacher to specifically answer, because to me, it's not just what the score is. It's like, when a parent contacts me, if they email me, I actually go into PowerSchool and I look at on which assessments they scored well and which ones they didn't, because some topics are more valuable than others, or some are greater predictors than others. So it isn't just the score, but I would say If they have anything in the A range, including an A minus, you know, choose whichever the course the student wants, what they're interested in. If they're in the B level, they're getting something in the B's, they understand everything, but they're not good at a testing situation, then they could probably, like, if the teacher says, oh no, they understand it. They're just not able to demonstrate that in a testing format, but they're showing in class the child is able to do this and this and this. Well, by all means, we want to advance them. We want to challenge them. The testing format is not everything. It's unfortunately in the world of math education, math tests are highly valued. You know, because you can't really write a math paper necessarily, or you know, that kind of thing. But we do try to, for students who simply struggle on tests but have a great understanding, we want them to be challenged too. So that could be someone who's getting a B or maybe even a C plus. Or if you know, look, they had a difficult time during this one marking period because these things were going on in our personal life, and this brought my child's average down. Okay, well, if that brought your child's average down, but the teacher is saying the child has a great understanding of mathematics and rises to challenge, then I would let the child choose whatever they want. But if they're shaky in any way, and here's the biggie, because we allow retakes on tests and students are able to earn back some points on things, if they're having to repeatedly do that in order to stay afloat, that tells me they're not really understanding it at the rate that we're teaching it. And so that, to me, yes, we're able to find ways for them to still get a good grade, but they're not truly fluent and independent. And so I would think about keeping them either on the same level or taking a step back. That's just my take. It's a hard sell with kids, I have to admit. Like, it's not easy to convince a child to slow down. I mean, I've seen a lot of sixth graders who choose pre-algebra who come in thinking they have the answers to the world. They've got it all going on. And their self-esteem is really wrapped up in this idea of being in grade 6 pre-algebra. That can be a pretty serious blow if they then need to move down or are struggling with it. So a lot of it's how we frame it. And this isn't about, I like to frame it that this is really about pace and more than it is about how good you are at math or what a great thinker you are. But you can have someone, it's sort of like how fast, they could burn out fast, or there are others, the tortoise and the hare, right? You can have the hare and you can have the tortoise who's going to move at a very deliberate pace and not rush, and then finish absolutely in the same place and maybe ahead of the hare. That's what it's like. The tortoise and the hare. Good lesson on fables. Aesop rules again. If a student takes Algebra 1 in 8th grade, then what course are they being set up to take in 9th grade? Geometry is the answer. I think he answered, he did answer about 3 years are required high school. I've always had issues with my Power School. So if you're having trouble with Power School and you're not able to go in and select a course, you can email me directly, KBEANE at SOMSD.K12.NJ.US, and just tell me what your child's choice is, and I will enter it. Simple as that. You could also probably tell the child's teacher and they could enter it, but I find a lot of times someone emails the teacher and then the teacher forwards it to me. So you can you can just send it to me directly. So either send it to the teacher or send it to me. Either way, it's going to get entered. Can a student change level if they find the current course too easy or challenging? If they find it too easy, they can move up. If they're going to move up to a more challenging course, we usually want that to happen pretty early in the year, like by mid-October, only because the course is moving very fast and it becomes harder and harder to be successful if you enter the course late. But if they're going to move from pre-algebra to grade 6 math, or from algebra 1 to grade 7 pre-algebra, that can happen anytime. We don't set a time on that because they're not really missing anything when they move down. It's very useful to ask their math teacher what they think. The math teacher knows the best, and fifth grade teachers, many of them are very experienced. They're very accustomed to this question, and they know what to consider when giving the answer. Now, it's a little different in that they don't actually teach sixth grade, so they don't know what it fully is like when the students get to sixth grade. But we do have times where they've come to observe sixth grade classes and sort of see what it's like, and they get to see. I let them know where their students, what courses they selected, and then where those students end up and how they do. We follow that so that they can get a sense of, oh, okay, so that's the type of child that's being successful or whatever. So they have a pretty good knowledge base in order to make that decision. And they also know that it's all about whole number comp, decimal comp, and fraction. I like watching the number of participants drop. It's like, I don't know, I feel like I'm losing at a video game. Yes, if algebra 1 is too difficult, students can absolutely move into grade 7 pre-algebra in 7th grade, or in 8th grade, they can move into algebra. Not only is it possible, we recommend it. If a 6th grader takes pre-algebra, do they generally move throughout the day with the same group of kids in that math class, or are they able to in classes with other children? I'm not intimately knowledgeable of the schedule. I know that I used to answer this like, no, it doesn't mean that they'll be with the same kids all day, but then I've been corrected. Where teachers and administrators will be like, no, it kind of does drive the schedule. So yes, what their math classes, they will often be with those same students in other classes. What's the formula to be successful in algebra? Well, this is the $1 million question in the United States, I think. Because as a country, we are not, algebra 1 does not come easily to everyone in our country. It's like, I have so many friends in real life who are like, when they find out what I do, or they, I knew them from college and now they know what I do, they're sort of like, oh, never mention algebra 1 to me again. It was so difficult for my children, or whatever. So the reason it's difficult isn't the skills. The skills are challenging. But what's really hard about algebra 1 is to understand what the heck is going on? Why am I doing this? Right. And so to be able to understand that we're trying to see the impact of moving all of these different variables is a really hard thing for them to understand, because it just seems like, okay, so the U used to face up and now it's facing down. Why does that matter? It's the abstraction of it. It's dealing in this two-dimensional world rather than dealing with numbers, because especially if they were successful with numbers in, like K through 6, and suddenly that's not the end all be all anymore. We just assume you're good with numbers, and we're now moving into this whole other thing. But really, it's about obviously being able to solve equations would be a big part of it. But really, it's about being able to connect the equations to what it creates on a 4-quadrant graph, and how you're able to move that, either whether it's a line when we're teaching linearity, straight line, and we're dealing with which way the slope is going and how steep the slope is, or when we're in quadratics and we have this sort of U shape, how can we, invert it, move it to a different quadrant? How does changing the different variables, how does it relate? And that's all about solving quadratic equations, which is, the stuff of some people's nightmares. And, but it's really cool if you can step back from the procedures of it and understand what you're doing with the graph, and how that can be, how that, in my mind, it sort of leads to, yes, it of course leads to calculus someday, of course. But to me, whenever a student asks me, why am I learning this? Because I'm never going to use it. And I say, if I happen to know that they're good at language arts, I will say, well, why do you learn poetry? You're never going to use it, right? You're not going to go around writing poems for work unless, you work at Hallmark or something. I mean, most people are never going to use poetry, but it's the same thing. It's teaching your mind to think in a more grand way, to think abstractly and reason. It opens up an intellectual line of thinking. So the kids have to be ready for that. And if I can be really blunt, I can say that the first half of Algebra 1, students generally are kind of okay with, because you're just taking that slope of that line and it's just a simple linear equation, and they get that. I can factor it. They get that. But as soon as you get into quadratics, and that there's all these different ways that you could approach this problem based on how the equation is initially structured, like, this is just so many things for them to consider at once. It makes no sense. And we have to work really hard to develop real world context to connect it to give it some kind of meaning. So it's just being able to live in that space that's in our minds and in our graphs more than in real life. Which sounds like a downer, but I love it. And lots of people love it, because it's just sort of like, to me, the thing about mathematics and algebra and really geometry is it's just a bunch of puzzles, and it's about loving the puzzle and not giving up. So tenacity is a huge piece, as well as having all of the math skills necessary to do it. All right, I think that's it, which is good, because I'm starting to do this. I can't see any of you, so just sort of, I'm talking to myself. If you have any other questions, please email me, kbeane@somsd.k12.nj.us. Don't feel like, oh, I don't want to bother her, because I honestly get hundreds of emails at this time of year, and it's perfectly normal. So it's, you're not asked, chances are very slim you're asking something no one has ever asked me before. So feel free to ask. I have lots of answers. Thanks a lot, everyone. This has been great. Anything else, feel free to contact me, or you can contact Mr. and Ms. Bahudin at the high school if you have a specific high school question.